CEO Millionaire shocked when he hits a little girl identical to him with a tennis ball, not knowing she's his daughter. Please hit that like button and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps our channel grow. Now enjoy this beautiful story. The morning air was crisp with promise as Alexander Mercer strode onto the private tennis court of his Hamptons estate. At 52, he still cut an impressive figure, tall and lean with salt and pepper hair meticulously styled even for a casual morning game. The gentle ocean breeze carried the scent of salt water and freshly cut grass, mingling with the distinctive pop of tennis balls against taut racket strings. This sound had always brought Alexander comfort, a rhythmic certainty in a world where he controlled nearly everything. "Harder, James. You're not even trying today," Alexander called out to his personal trainer, who was already sweating profusely despite the early hour. Alexander smirked as he watched James scramble to return a particularly vicious serve. This was how he liked to start his days, with a victory however small. As CEO of Mercer Innovations, one of the country's leading tech conglomerates, Alexander had built his empire through unwavering determination and ruthless business acumen. His company had revolutionized consumer electronics, making him not just wealthy but iconic. His face graced magazine covers. His name appeared in headlines. People whispered when he entered rooms. He had everything money could buy: the oceanfront estate, the Manhattan penthouse, the fleet of cars, the private jet. Everything except what he'd lost along the way. The morning sun glinted off his platinum watch as he prepared another serve, tossing the neon ball high into the cloudless blue sky. With practiced precision, he slammed his racket forward, sending the ball screaming across the court. James lunged desperately but missed. Another point for Alexander. "Let's take 5, James suggested, breathing heavily, his shirt darkened with sweat. Alexander scowled but nodded. He never tired, never wanted to stop, but he'd learned to feign normal human limitations around others. It kept them comfortable, kept them from asking questions about what drove him. He grabbed a monogrammed towel from the courtside bench and dabbed at his forehead, barely damp despite an hour of intense play. His phone buzzed with a message from his executive assistant, reminding him of the board meeting at noon. There was a potential acquisition to discuss, a smaller company with promising medical technology that could expand Mercer Innovations' portfolio. It would be another victory, another conquest in a lifetime of them. Yet lately these triumphs had begun to feel hollow, like collecting trophies with no one to show them to. The thought triggered an unwelcome memory, a different court 25 years ago, and a young woman with amber eyes who used to cheer from the sidelines. Claire. Even thinking her name made something tighten in his chest. They had been so young then, just starting out, with dreams bigger than their bank accounts. He had promised her the world, and when she had told him she was pregnant, he had panicked. His career was just taking off, and a family hadn't been part of his 5-year plan. "It's not the right time," he had told her. "We're not ready." But Claire had been ready. She had wanted their child more than she had wanted his promises of future wealth. When he gave her the ultimatum, him or the baby, she had looked at him with those amber eyes suddenly turned cold and walked away without a word. He had let her go, convinced he was making the rational choice. The memory dissolved as James returned to the court, ready to continue. Alexander shook off the past and positioned himself for another serve. The sun was higher now, warming his back through his designer polo shirt. He bounced the ball 3 times, his ritual, then tossed it skyward. His racket connected with satisfying force, sending the ball hurtling over the net with precision. But as he completed his follow-through, a movement beyond the fence caught his eye, a small figure darting past just outside the court's perimeter. The distraction was momentary, but it was enough to throw off his usually flawless recovery stance. He stumbled slightly, his attention divided between the returned ball and the blurry movement beyond the court. James, seeing his opportunity, returned the ball with unexpected vigor. Alexander lunged back into position, swinging wildly to compensate. His racket connected, but the ball sailed high and wide, soaring over the fence toward the garden path that wound around his property, the path where he had glimpsed the small figure. There was a soft thud, followed by a cry, high-pitched and startled, unmistakably a child's voice. Alexander froze, racket still extended mid-air. "What was that?" James asked, already moving toward the gate. Alexander found himself unable to speak, his throat suddenly dry. He lowered his racket and followed James, his heart pounding with unexpected force. As they rounded the fence to the garden path, he saw her, a little girl of perhaps 8 or 9, sitting on the ground, one small hand pressed to her shoulder where the tennis ball had struck her. Her eyes were wide with surprise rather than pain, tears gathering but not falling. She wore a simple sundress with sneakers, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. A small backpack lay beside her, its contents, a notebook, colored pencils and a half-eaten sandwich, scattered on the path. "Are you okay?" James asked, crouching beside her. "That ball came out of nowhere." The girl nodded bravely, blinking back tears. "I'm fine. It just surprised me." It was then that she looked up fully at Alexander, and the world seemed to tilt beneath his feet. Her eyes, a distinctive gray-blue with a sunburst of amber around the pupils, were identical to his own. The shape of her face, the slight cleft in her chin, the arch of her eyebrows, it was like looking at a feminine miniature version of himself. "What's your name?" Alexander asked, his voice hardly sounding like his own. "Lily," she said, her voice small but clear. "Lily Palmer." Palmer. The name meant nothing to him, but those eyes, Claire's eyes mingled with his own, sent a shock wave through him. Impossible coincidences tumbled through his mind as he stared at the child. "What are you doing on private property?" he asked, more harshly than he intended. The girl's face fell. "I'm sorry. I'm staying with my grandmother for the summer. Her house is over there." She pointed toward the neighboring property, a modest house that had been there long before Alexander built his mansion. "She said I could explore the beach path if I didn't bother anyone. I didn't know this was private." "It's all right," James interjected, shooting Alexander a concerned look. "No harm done. Let's make sure you're not hurt." But Alexander barely heard him. His mind was racing, calculating years and possibilities. "Your grandmother," he said carefully. "What's her name?" "Martha Reynolds," Lily replied, gathering her scattered belongings. "She's my mom's mom." Reynolds. Not a name he recognized from his past. The tight band around his chest loosened slightly. This was just a strange coincidence, a genetic fluke. Had to be. "And your mother?" he found himself asking. "Claire," Lily said simply, and the world contracted around Alexander once more. "Claire Palmer. But she's not here. She's working in Boston. That's why I'm with Grandma for the summer." Claire Palmer, not Claire Mercer. Not even Claire Reynolds, her maiden name. She had married someone else, taken another man's name. Of course she had, it had been 25 years. But the timing, the resemblance. "How old are you, Lily?" Alexander asked, his business voice deserting him entirely, leaving him sounding vulnerable in a way he hadn't allowed himself to be for decades. "I'm 8 3/4, she answered with the precision only children use when discussing their age. Not 25. Not the child Claire had been carrying when she walked away. His mental calculations relaxed again, relief flooding through him even as disappointment followed inexplicably in its wake. "Mr. Mercer, should I call someone?" James asked, clearly concerned by his employer's unusual behavior. "No," Alexander said quickly. "I'm fine. We should make sure Lily gets home safely." James nodded, helping the girl to her feet. As she stood, Alexander noticed a small medallion hanging from a chain around her neck, a tarnished silver tennis racket. "That's a nice necklace," he commented, trying to sound casual. Lily's hand went to it immediately, her face brightening. "It was my dad's. Mom says he was really good at tennis. He died before I was born, but Mom gave me his lucky charm." She held it up proudly. "I'm learning to play too. Mom says I have his talent." Alexander felt lightheaded, memories crashing over him like waves. He had worn that exact medallion during college tournaments. Claire had given it to him on their first anniversary, saying it would bring him luck. He had left it behind in their apartment when he moved out, another piece of himself abandoned in his relentless push forward. "Would you like some ice for your shoulder?" he asked, desperate to keep her talking, to unravel this impossible mystery unfolding before him. "I'm okay," Lily insisted, rolling her shoulder to demonstrate. "See? No harm done. But I should probably go back to Grandma's. She'll be wondering where I am." "I'll walk you," Alexander said immediately, surprising both James and himself. "To make sure you get there safely." James raised an eyebrow but knew better than to question his boss. "I'll clean up the court, sir." Lily looked hesitant. "You don't have to. It's just over there." She pointed again to the modest house visible through the trees. "I insist," Alexander said, already moving in that direction. "It's the least I can do after hitting you with a tennis ball." As they walked along the path, Alexander struggled to find appropriate conversation. He was accustomed to boardrooms and business negotiations, not chatting with 8-year-old girls. But Lily seemed at ease, skipping occasionally beside him, pointing out interesting shells or stones along the path. Do you live in that big house all by yourself? She asked suddenly. Most of the time, he admitted. I have staff, of course. And I'm not there very often. I travel a lot for work. That sounds lonely, Lily observed with the devastating honesty of childhood. Alexander had never thought of it as lonely. Solitary, yes. Private, certainly. But her simple observation cut through decades of carefully constructed justifications. It can be, he found himself admitting. But I'm very busy. I run a large company. My mom's busy too, Lily said. She's a doctor. That's why I'm staying with Grandma this summer. Mom had to go to Africa with Doctors Without Borders. A doctor. Claire had become a doctor. He remembered her pre-med textbooks spread across their tiny apartment, remembered how he'd thought her dreams were too small compared to his own entrepreneurial ambitions. Now she was saving lives across the world while he accumulated wealth in solitude. That's very admirable work, he said quietly. Yeah, she's pretty awesome, Lily agreed. She helps lots of people. They reached the edge of his property, the path opening onto a small stretch of beach that connected to the neighboring house. It was a quaint cottage, well-maintained but modest, exactly the kind of place Claire would have loved. An older woman was gardening in the front yard. When she saw them approaching, she straightened up, pulling off her gardening gloves with a concerned expression. Lily? Who's this? She called, moving toward them with surprising quickness for her age. This is Mr. Mercer from the big house, Grandma, Lily explained. His tennis ball hit me, but I'm okay. Martha Reynolds' expression shifted from concern to recognition as she looked at Alexander. There was something in her eyes, knowledge, wariness, that made him certain she knew exactly who he was, beyond being the wealthy neighbor. Mr. Mercer, she said coolly. Thank you for escorting Lily home. It was no trouble, he replied, suddenly feeling awkward under her scrutiny. I wanted to make sure she was all right. Martha put a protective arm around her granddaughter. She's tougher than she looks. Palmer women always are. There was something pointed in her tone, a message beneath the words that Alexander couldn't quite decipher. Lily looked back and forth between them, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Grandma, can Mr. Mercer stay for lemonade? Lily asked unexpectedly. He said he lives all alone in that big house. That's sad. Martha's expression softened as she looked at her granddaughter, then hardened again when she turned back to Alexander. I'm sure Mr. Mercer is very busy. Actually, Alexander said, surprising himself again, I have some time this morning. A battle of wills played out silently between the adults until Martha relented with a sigh. Very well. Lily, go wash up first. As Lily skipped into the house, Martha turned to Alexander, her gaze unflinching. She doesn't know. It wasn't a question, but Alexander answered anyway. Know what? Don't play games with me, Alexander Mercer. I recognized you the moment Claire moved us here for the summer. Your face is on enough magazines. So she did know him. Claire moved you here? To this house specifically. Martha's expression was unreadable. Claire needed someone to watch Lily while she's away. I've owned this cottage for 40 years. It's coincidence that you built your monument to excess next door. Alexander flinched at her assessment but pressed on. Lily, is she your daughter? Martha finished for him. What do you think? The medallion, the eyes, the timing, it all pointed to one impossible conclusion. But she's only 8, he said. Claire and I haven't been together for 25 years. Martha's expression shifted slightly. Claire did have a baby after you left. A little boy. There were complications. Neither survived the birth. The news hit Alexander like a physical blow. All these years he had imagined Claire raising their child somewhere, building a life without him. He had comforted himself with the thought that she was happy, that their child, his child, was thriving. To learn that they had both died, that his choices had led to such tragedy, made his knees weak. I didn't know, he whispered. She never told me. Would it have changed anything? Martha asked, her voice laced with years of buried grief. Before he could answer, Lily reappeared at the door, calling them inside. Martha gave him one last measuring look before turning to follow her granddaughter. For what it's worth, she said quietly, Lily is not that child. Claire married David Palmer 15 years after you. He was a good man, a surgeon. They had 9 wonderful years together before his heart gave out. Lily was born a month after he died. Relief and disappointment warred within Alexander as he followed Martha into the cottage. So Lily wasn't his daughter after all. The resemblance was just a cruel coincidence, a genetic echo of what might have been. The interior of the cottage was warm and lived in, with mismatched furniture and walls covered in photographs. Alexander's eyes were drawn immediately to a framed picture on the mantel. Claire, older but unmistakable, her amber eyes shining as she cradled a newborn Lily. Beside her stood a tall man with dark hair and a gentle smile. David Palmer. The man who had given Claire the family Alexander had refused her. But as he looked closer at the photograph, something cold settled in his stomach. David Palmer had dark brown eyes, nothing like the distinctive gray-blue of Alexander's own, the same gray-blue that stared back at him from Lily's face. "Lemonade's ready," Lily announced, carrying a tray with 3 glasses. "I made it myself yesterday." "Thank you," Alexander said automatically, accepting a glass. His mind was still processing, still questioning. Lily sat beside him on the worn sofa, flipping open her notebook. "Do you want to see my drawings? I'm going to be an artist when I grow up. Or maybe a doctor like Mom. Or maybe both." "I'd love to," Alexander replied, genuinely curious about this child who both was and wasn't his. As Lily turned pages, proudly explaining each drawing, Alexander felt Martha's eyes on him. When Lily went to fetch more of her artwork from her room, he turned to the older woman. "David Palmer didn't have blue eyes," he said simply. Martha sighed deeply. "No, he didn't." "Then how?" "Claire was already pregnant when she met David," Martha said quietly. "About 3 months along. They fell in love quickly. He knew about the baby and wanted to marry her anyway to give the child his name." Alexander's mind raced. But that would mean. "Claire was in New York for a medical conference 9 years ago," Martha continued. "She said she saw you at the hotel bar. Said you didn't recognize her at first. She'd cut her hair, lost weight after her residency. When you did, you both had drinks. Too many drinks." Alexander remembered that night with sudden, piercing clarity. A hotel bar after a successful product launch. A woman who had seemed familiar but whom he couldn't quite place until she smiled. Claire. They had talked for hours, falling into the easy rhythm they had once shared. One night she had called it. One night for closure before they returned to their separate lives. "She never told me," he whispered. "Would you have wanted to know?" Martha challenged. "You made your choice very clear the first time." Before he could respond, Lily bounded back into the room with a larger sketchbook. "Look. These are my special drawings." Alexander turned his attention to the child, his child, with new awareness. Every gesture, every expression now seemed profound, significant. He saw himself in the way she tilted her head when considering a question, in the precise way she arranged her colored pencils. "These are wonderful," he told her sincerely, his voice thick with emotion. "You're very talented." Lily beamed at the praise. As she continued showing him her drawings, Alexander felt something shifting within himself. The emptiness that had haunted his achievements, the hollow success that never quite satisfied, it all made sense now. He had built an empire while leaving behind the only thing that truly mattered. His phone buzzed insistently in his pocket, the board meeting he had forgotten entirely. 20 executives would be waiting for him, along with lawyers and the representatives from the medical technology company he planned to acquire. "I have to go," he said reluctantly, standing. "Thank you for the lemonade, Lily. And for showing me your wonderful artwork." Lily's face fell with disappointment. "Will you come back sometime? I could show you the shell collection I'm making. Or you could teach me some tennis moves. Mom says I have natural talent, but Grandma doesn't play." Alexander looked to Martha, whose expression remained guarded but no longer hostile. "That would be up to your grandmother," he said carefully. After a long moment, Martha nodded slightly. "Perhaps on Saturday. If Mr. Mercer isn't too busy." "I won't be," Alexander said quickly. "Saturday would be perfect." As he walked back to his estate, Alexander's mind was a tempest of emotions and realizations. The board meeting, the acquisition, the quarterly projections. All the things that had seemed so vital that morning now felt insignificant compared to the discovery of Lily's existence. He entered his mansion, the cavernous foyer echoing with his footsteps. James had left a note saying he'd cleaned up the tennis court and would return tomorrow as scheduled. Alexander barely noticed as he moved through the house that had never felt like a home. In his study, he sat heavily in his leather chair, ignoring the blinking light of his phone indicating missed calls. Instead, he opened his laptop and did something he hadn't done in years. He searched for Claire Palmer, formerly Claire Reynolds. Articles appeared immediately. Dr. Claire Palmer, respected pediatric surgeon, currently on her 3rd mission with Doctors Without Borders. There she was, the woman he had once loved, now distinguished with streaks of silver in her dark hair, those amber eyes still bright with purpose as she held an African child in a recent photograph. Alexander leaned back, overwhelmed. All these years, he had told himself that his sacrifice had been necessary, that leaving Claire, refusing the responsibility of parenthood, had been the only way to achieve his vision. He had believed that his success justified every personal connection he had severed. Now, looking at Claire's accomplished career and thinking of the daughter he never knew he had, he realized the hollowness of that justification. Claire had built a meaningful life without compromising her compassion. She had become successful on her own terms while embracing the very responsibility he had fled. And Lily, bright, creative Lily with his eyes and Claire's spirit, was growing up without knowing her biological father. David Palmer, by all accounts a good and decent man, had given her his name and would have given her his love had he lived. Alexander felt a stab of something like jealousy, immediately followed by shame. What right did he have to any part of Lily's life when he had rejected the possibility before she was even conceived? His phone rang again, his executive assistant, probably frantic about his absence from the board meeting. Alexander stared at the screen for a long moment before declining the call. Then he did something unprecedented in his career as CEO. He emailed his assistant to reschedule all appointments for the day, citing a personal emergency. Personal emergency. The phrase felt both inadequate and profoundly accurate. He was in the midst of the most personal emergency of his life, the sudden, disorienting recognition that everything he had prioritized might have been a mistake. The afternoon stretched before him, empty of the meetings and calls that usually filled his days. Alexander moved to the window, looking out toward the cottage where his daughter was staying. His daughter. The word still felt foreign, impossible. On impulse, he reached for his phone again and called his lawyer. "Richard, I need you to set up a trust fund. Immediately. For a minor child." He paused. "And I need information on establishing paternity and potential custody arrangements." Richard, accustomed to Alexander's demanding requests, promised to have preliminary documents by morning. Alexander ended the call feeling both purposeful and uncertain. Money was the easiest thing for him to give, far easier than emotional availability or genuine presence. Would Claire even want him involved in Lily's life? Would Lily herself want to know the truth about her parentage? The questions haunted him as dusk fell over the Hamptons. From his window, he could see lights coming on in Martha's cottage, could imagine Lily and her grandmother preparing dinner, sharing stories of their day. He wondered if Lily had mentioned meeting him, if Martha had hinted at the truth. His own dinner, prepared by his private chef and left in the warming drawer, remained untouched as Alexander paced his study. For the first time in decades, business concerns had been completely displaced by personal ones. The acquisition that had seemed so important that morning now felt trivial compared to the question of how, or whether, to become part of his daughter's life. As midnight approached, Alexander made a decision. He couldn't undo the past, couldn't reclaim the years lost with his first child or with Claire, but he could choose a different path forward. He would need to move carefully, respecting Claire's wishes and Lily's well-being above his own desire for connection. But he would no longer hide behind work or wealth to avoid the messy, vital business of human relationships. Saturday arrived with perfect summer weather. Clear skies, gentle breeze, temperature in the mid-70s. Alexander had spent the intervening days in a state of uncharacteristic distraction, rescheduling meetings and delegating decisions that would normally have required his personal attention. His executive team was bewildered by the sudden change, but years of demanding their absolute loyalty now paid dividends in their unquestioning acceptance of his new priorities. He had also made several calls to Richard, revising his initial instructions for the trust fund and custody inquiry. After reflection, he had realized that barging into Lily's life with legal documents and financial arrangements would likely alienate both her and Claire. A more measured approach was needed, one that acknowledged Claire's primary role in their daughter's life and respected the family structure she had built. At precisely 10 o'clock, Alexander walked the path to Martha's cottage, a small gift bag in hand. He had spent hours considering what to bring, rejecting expensive electronics and designer clothes as inappropriate. What did one give an 8-year-old girl one had just discovered was one's daughter? In the end, he had settled on a beginner's art set, quality materials but not ostentatious. Lily answered his knock, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure at seeing him. "Mr. Mercer. You came. Grandma said you might be too busy." "I made time," he said simply, handing her the gift. "I brought you something." Martha appeared behind her granddaughter, her expression more welcoming than it had been during their first encounter. "Good morning, Alexander. Coffee?" Thank you, he accepted, following them inside as Lily excitedly opened her gift. An art set. Real artist pencils and everything, she exclaimed, examining each item with reverence. Thank you, Mr. Mercer. You're welcome, he replied, oddly moved by her enthusiastic gratitude. Children in his world, the children of business associates and board members, were accustomed to extravagant gifts and responded with practiced politeness rather than genuine excitement. Lily, why don't you take your new art supplies to the porch while Mr. Mercer and I chat? Martha suggested. Once Lily was happily settled outside, Martha poured coffee for them both and sat across from Alexander at the kitchen table. I spoke with Claire yesterday, she said without preamble. Alexander's heart rate quickened. You told her about our meeting? Martha nodded. I had to. This isn't something I could keep from her. Of course, Alexander agreed, though anxiety coursed through him. How did she react? She was surprised, as you might imagine. Concerned about what your intentions might be. Alexander traced the rim of his coffee cup with one finger, organizing his thoughts. I honestly don't know what my intentions are, he admitted. I never expected this situation. I never knew about Lily. What would you have done if you had known? Martha asked, her tone not accusatory but genuinely curious. It was the question he had been asking himself for days. 9 years ago? I don't know. I was still driven. Focused entirely on building my company. I'd like to think I would have supported Claire, been involved in Lily's life, but you had already chosen your path when you left Claire the first time, Martha finished for him. Alexander nodded, acknowledging the truth of her assessment. I've been successful beyond what even I imagined then. Mercer Innovations is valued at billions. I have homes around the world, can buy anything I want. And yet. He looked toward the porch, where Lily was already using her new supplies, her face a study in concentration. And yet seeing Lily makes me question everything I've prioritized. Martha's expression softened slightly. Claire doesn't need your money, Alexander. She's done very well for herself, and David left them financially secure. And Lily doesn't need a disruption in her life. She's a happy, well-adjusted child who believes her father was a good man who would have loved her if he had lived. Which is true, Alexander said quickly. From what you've told me, David Palmer was a far better man than I am. I'm not looking to replace him in Lily's memory. Then what are you looking for? It was the question at the heart of his sleepless nights. A chance, he said finally. Not to be her father. That role belongs to David Palmer even in death. But perhaps to be something. A friend. A presence in her life, even if she never knows the full truth. Martha studied him for a long moment, as if measuring the sincerity of his words. Claire will be home in 3 weeks. Until then, she's agreed that you can visit Lily occasionally, as a neighbor, nothing more. No hints about your true connection, no lavish gifts, no attempts to buy her affection. When Claire returns, the 3 of us will discuss the future. It was more than he had dared hope for and less than he had secretly wanted. But it was a beginning, a chance to know the child who shared his blood, if not his name. Thank you, he said simply. Martha's gaze was penetrating. Don't make me regret this, Alexander. That child's happiness means everything to us. I understand, he assured her, and for perhaps the first time in his adult life, he put someone else's needs completely above his own ambitions. The 3 weeks that followed transformed Alexander's life in ways both subtle and profound. He visited the cottage every few days, sometimes bringing small, thoughtful gifts for Lily, a book on drawing techniques, special paper for her art, but more often simply spending time with her. They walked the beach collecting shells, flew a kite in the gentle summer breeze, and yes, began tennis lessons on his private court. Lily was a natural athlete, just as her mother had told her, picking up the basics of tennis with remarkable speed. But it was her artistic talent that truly impressed Alexander. Her drawings showed not just technical skill unusual for her age, but a perspective and emotional depth that spoke to her inherent empathy. This is your house, she explained, showing him a detailed drawing of his mansion. But where Alexander had always seen a showcase of his success, Lily had captured something else. The emptiness of the grand structure, its windows dark, its garden paths untraveled. Is that how it looks to you? He asked, studying the skillful rendering. Lily shrugged. It's a beautiful house, but it doesn't look like anyone lives there. Like it's waiting for something. Her innocent observation struck him with the force of revelation. His home, like his life, had been waiting all this time. Waiting for meaning beyond acquisition, for connection beyond transaction. As the days passed, Alexander found himself rearranging his schedule to maximize his time in the Hamptons. He conducted business via video conference from his home office rather than flying to meetings, delegated presentations he would normally have handled personally, and for the first time in his career, left his phone behind when spending time with Lily. His executive team was bewildered by the change but adapted with the resilience he had selected them for. Only his CFO, Thomas, who had been with him since the early days, dared to question the shift. "Is everything all right, Alex?" he asked during a private call. "The board is getting nervous about your absence. The Jensen acquisition is stalling without your direct involvement." "Everything is fine," Alexander assured him. "Better than fine, actually. I'm just re-evaluating priorities. The acquisition will proceed, but on a slightly extended timeline." Thomas was silent for a moment. "This isn't like you. You've never put anything ahead of the company before." "Perhaps that's been the problem," Alexander replied, surprising both Thomas and himself with the admission. As Claire's return approached, Alexander found himself increasingly anxious about their inevitable confrontation. Would she see his interest in Lily's life as genuine, or as another manifestation of his controlling nature? Would she reveal the truth of Lily's paternity, or maintain the fiction that David Palmer was her biological father? 2 days before Claire was due to arrive, he invited Lily and Martha to dinner at his house, the first time he had entertained guests there for any purpose other than business. He had dismissed his usual staff for the evening, choosing instead to cook himself, a skill long neglected but not forgotten from his graduate school days. "Your house is even bigger inside," Lily exclaimed as he gave them a tour. "But where are all the pictures?" Alexander looked around his immaculate, impersonal living room with new eyes. There were expensive paintings on the walls, certainly, but no photographs, no personal mementos, nothing to indicate that the space was a home rather than a showpiece. "I'm not very good at decorating," he admitted. "You need some of my drawings," Lily decided, already planning where they might go. "And pictures of people you love. That's what makes a house happy. People you love." The phrase lingered in Alexander's mind as they sat down to dinner, the three of them at one end of a table designed to seat 20. Who did he love? Before Lily, he might have struggled to answer that question. His parents were long dead, relationships with women had been fleeting and largely transactional, and friendships had been sacrificed to his relentless ambition. "This is delicious," Martha said, genuine surprise in her voice as she tasted the pasta he had prepared. "I wouldn't have expected you to cook." "I'm full of surprises," Alexander replied with a small smile. "Though I admit it's been years since I've made this. Claire and I used to." He stopped, realizing too late the dangerous territory he was entering. But Lily had caught the reference. "You knew my mom?" she asked, eyes wide with interest. Martha shot him a warning look, but Alexander navigated carefully. "A long time ago, before you were born. We were friends in college." "Cool," Lily exclaimed. "Mom never talks about her college days. Was she smart back then too?" "The smartest person I knew," Alexander said honestly. "And the kindest?" "She always knew what she wanted to do with her life, help people, make a difference." "That's still what she does," Lily said proudly. "She fixes kids' hearts so they can play and grow up strong." "She always had a gift for healing," Alexander agreed, remembering how Claire had mended his own wounds after his mother's death, how she had taught him to open up after years of emotional isolation. Until he had closed himself off again, choosing ambition over. The day of Claire's return arrived with a clarity that matched the summer sky. Alexander had spent the morning in his home office, attempting to focus on quarterly reports but finding his mind repeatedly drifting to the impending meeting. When his phone chimed with a text from Martha, "Claire is home. Come at 4". He closed his laptop without hesitation. At precisely 4 o'clock he stood at the cottage door, heart hammering with an intensity he hadn't felt since his first major product launch. When the door opened, there she was, Claire Palmer, the woman he had once loved and carelessly discarded. Time had been kind to her. The laugh lines around her eyes and strands of silver in her dark hair only enhanced her natural beauty. But it was her eyes that caught him, those amber eyes that had once looked at him with adoration, then hurt, and now regarded him with cautious neutrality. "Alexander," she said simply, stepping aside to let him enter. "Claire," he replied, suddenly at a loss for the carefully prepared speech he had mentally rehearsed. "You look well." "Africa agrees with me," she said, leading him to the living room where Martha sat with Lily. "Though I missed this one terribly." She embraced her daughter, who had leapt up at her mother's entrance. "Mom, Mr. Mercer taught me how to serve a tennis ball properly." And he saw my drawings and says I have real talent. Claire's eyes met Alexander's over their daughter's head. Their daughter, though only they and Martha knew the truth of it. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Why don't you show Grandma your new serve technique in the backyard while Mr. Mercer and I catch up? Once they were alone, silence stretched between them like a chasm. Alexander, accustomed to commanding boardrooms and steering billion-dollar negotiations, found himself uncharacteristically tongue-tied. Martha told me you've been spending time with Lily, Claire said finally, taking a seat across from him. Yes, he acknowledged, remaining standing, too restless to sit. She's remarkable, Claire. Talented, perceptive, kind, everything I'm not. A flicker of surprise crossed Claire's face at his self-deprecation. She gets her kindness from her father, she said pointedly. David was the gentlest soul I've ever known. Alexander nodded, accepting the implied rebuke. I'm sure he was. I'm not trying to replace him in Lily's life, Claire. I want you to know that. Then what are you trying to do? She asked, the question direct but her tone less confrontational than he had expected. He moved to the window, watching Lily demonstrate her tennis serve to an appreciative Martha in the small backyard. I don't know, he admitted. When I first realized who she was, what she is to me, I had all these impulses. Set up trust funds, change my will, assert paternity rights, all the things money and power can accomplish. That sounds like the Alexander the First, remember, Claire said dryly. He turned back to her, meeting her gaze directly. But the more time I spent with her, the more I realized none of that matters. She doesn't need my money or my name. She's already whole, already loved. What right do I have to disrupt that? Claire studied him for a long moment. You've changed, she said finally. Not enough, he replied. Not yet. But I'm trying to. She gestured for him to sit, her posture relaxing slightly. Martha says you've been good with Lily. Thoughtful. Patient. Those weren't qualities I associated with you. I never gave them a chance to develop, he acknowledged. Work was always the priority. Building the company, then scaling it, then maintaining market dominance. There was always another mountain to climb, another competitor to vanquish. And now I find myself at the summit, looking down at a path strewn with discarded relationships and missed opportunities. He leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees. Starting with you, Claire. What I did to you both times was unforgivable. Claire's expression softened slightly. I didn't come back here for your apology, Alexander. And I didn't tell Lily about you 9 years ago because I didn't want her growing up with a father who saw her as an obligation or an inconvenience. I understand that, he said quietly. And you were right to protect her. But I need you to know, I want to be part of her life, in whatever capacity you think is appropriate. Not as a replacement for David, not as a biological revelation that might confuse or hurt her, but just as someone who cares about her. Claire was silent for a long moment, her physician's gaze seeming to x-ray through his carefully maintained composure to the vulnerability beneath. Why should I trust you with her heart when you handled mine so carelessly? The question struck him like a physical blow, all the more powerful for its simple truth. You shouldn't, he admitted. I haven't earned that trust. But I'm asking for the chance to try. Before Claire could respond, the back door burst open and Lily bounded in, full of energy. Mom? Grandma says we should all have dinner together. Can we? Please? Claire looked from her daughter to Alexander, then back again. If Mr. Mercer isn't too busy, she said carefully. I'm not, Alexander assured them quickly. I'd be honored to join you. That dinner was the first of many shared meals over the weeks that followed. Claire, having completed her overseas commitment, was taking a sabbatical from her surgical practice to spend time with Lily before the school year began. The four of them fell into an unexpected rhythm. Morning walks on the beach, impromptu tennis lessons, afternoons where Alexander would work from the cottage while Claire caught up on medical journals and Lily drew or read nearby. They never discussed Alexander's biological connection to Lily during these times. Instead, they constructed a narrative for Lily's benefit, that Alexander and Claire had been college friends who had reconnected by chance, and that Alexander, having no family of his own, had become a sort of honorary uncle. Lily thrived under the arrangement, dividing her time between tennis practice with Alexander and art projects encouraged by her mother. Claire, initially wary, gradually relaxed as she observed Alexander's genuine interest in Lily's development and his respectful adherence to the boundaries she had established. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, the adults lingered on the porch, watching distant lightning illuminate the horizon over the ocean. Martha had retired early, leaving Claire and Alexander alone with a bottle of wine and years of unspoken history between them. I received an offer from Johns Hopkins yesterday, Claire said, breaking a comfortable silence, to head their new pediatric cardiac surgery center. Alexander felt a pang of alarm. In Baltimore? Claire nodded. It's a remarkable opportunity. State-of-the-art facilities, research budget, teaching responsibilities, everything I've worked toward. You'll take it, of course, Alexander said, trying to keep disappointment from his voice. It's where you belong, at the forefront of your field, saving lives. Claire studied him over the rim of her wineglass. What about you? Surely the great Alexander Mercer can't continue neglecting his empire to play tennis with an 8-year-old indefinitely. Actually, he said, I've been rethinking the structure of Mercer Innovations. The board is pushing for me to take on more of a strategic role, chairman rather than CEO. Less day-to-day management, more long-term vision. And how do you feel about that? Alexander considered the question seriously. 6 months ago I would have fought it tooth and nail. The company has been my identity for so long that stepping back would have felt like failure, somehow. Now, he shrugged. Now I find there are other things I value more than being the man who makes every decision. Claire's expression was thoughtful. Like spending time with Lily. Like spending time with both of you, he clarified. If you'll allow it. The implication hung in the air between them. Claire set down her wineglass, her expression guarded. Alexander, if you're suggesting... I'm not suggesting anything, he interrupted gently. Except that I've reconfigured my life once to accommodate the possibility of being in Lily's life. I can do it again if you take the position in Baltimore. Why? Claire asked, the question direct and unadorned. Alexander looked out at the storm gathering over the ocean, lightning illuminating the churning waves. Because in all my life the only times I felt truly alive, truly present were with you, and now with Lily. Everything else, the wealth, the power, the achievements, they're just distractions from what I walked away from. Twice. Claire was quiet for a long moment. When I saw you in that hotel bar 9 years ago, I told myself it was closure I was seeking. One night to put the past to rest. I never intended to tell you about the pregnancy. I understand why, Alexander said. I hadn't given you any reason to believe I'd be different than I was the first time. And yet here you are, Claire mused, completely rearranging your life for a child who doesn't even know you're her father. She doesn't need to know, Alexander said firmly. David Palmer is her father in every way that matters. I'm content to be whatever you think is best for her. Friend, uncle figure, tennis coach. He smiled slightly. I've learned very late in life that titles and recognition aren't what make relationships meaningful. The storm was moving closer, thunder now audible in the distance. Claire stood, collecting their empty glasses. I haven't decided about Johns Hopkins yet, she said. Lily loves her school in Boston, her friends there. And there's her art program. And there's the matter of us, Alexander added quietly. The three of us and what we might become. Claire looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable in the darkness. Yes, she said finally. There's that too. Summer gave way to early autumn, the Hamptons beaches growing quieter as vacationers returned to their regular lives. Claire had requested a deadline extension from Johns Hopkins, and Alexander had begun the process of transitioning daily operational control of Mercer Innovations to his longtime COO, Janet Wu. The board had been surprised but ultimately supportive once Alexander explained his vision. He would remain as chairman, focusing on strategic partnerships and product innovation, areas where his particular genius had always shined brightest. Janet, with her methodical management style and deep institutional knowledge, was better suited to day-to-day operations than he had ever been. You seem different, Thomas commented during a video call discussing the transition. More at peace. Alexander looked out his home office window toward the cottage, where Lily was helping Claire plant fall flowers in the garden. I am, he acknowledged. I found something more important than quarterly growth. As the days shortened and the air grew crisp, Alexander found himself dreading the inevitable end of their summer arrangement. Lily would need to return to school, and Claire would need to make her decision about Johns Hopkins. His own life, so radically reconfigured over the past months, hung in suspended animation, waiting for choices not his to make. The decision, when it came, arrived not in grand pronouncements but in quiet moments of clarity. On a cool September evening, as Alexander prepared to return to his mansion after dinner at the cottage, Lily surprised him with a gift, a carefully wrapped package that revealed a framed drawing. It showed 4 figures on a beach, a tall man with gray-blue eyes, a woman with amber eyes, an older woman with a gentle smile, and a small girl between them, holding hands with all three. "It's us," Lily explained unnecessarily. "Our family." Alexander felt emotion constrict his throat as he gazed at the simple, profound illustration. "Our family," he repeated, looking up to find Claire watching them, her expression a complex mixture of tenderness and apprehension. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Claire joined Alexander on the beach for what had become their customary evening walk. "She sees you as family," Claire said without preamble. "She's attached to you now." "And I to her," Alexander replied. "To both of you." Claire stopped walking, turning to face the ocean. "I called Johns Hopkins today. I turned down the position." Alexander struggled to mask his surge of relief and hope. "Why?" "It was everything you've worked for." "Not everything," Claire corrected him. "There's a position available at New York Presbyterian. Head of pediatric surgery. Not quite as prestigious as Johns Hopkins, but excellent facilities, strong research component. And closer to the Hamptons," Alexander finished for her. "Closer to whatever this is becoming," Claire agreed, gesturing vaguely between them. "I'm not making any promises, Alexander. This isn't some fairy tale reunion where we pick up where we left off 25 years ago. Too much has happened. We're different people now." "I know," he assured her. "I don't expect." "Let me finish," she interrupted gently. "I don't know what we are to each other now, but I do know that Lily deserves the chance to know her biological father, even if we never tell her the full truth. And I." She hesitated, then continued with characteristic directness. "I find myself curious about the man you've become." Alexander felt hope expand in his chest, cautious but undeniable. "Does that mean you'll stay? Both of you?" "It means we'll try," Claire clarified. "One day at a time. Martha has agreed to sell me the cottage. It's time she moved back to her condo in Florida anyway, closer to her doctors." "I could help with that," Alexander offered, then immediately raised his hands in surrender at her expression. "Sorry? Old habits." Claire's smile was wry but not unkind. "You'll have plenty of opportunities to help, Alexander. Lily starts at Bridgehampton Day School next week. She'll need transportation to tennis lessons, art classes, not to mention a science fair project partner who understands electronics." Alexander found himself grinning like a teenager. "I think I can manage that schedule." They continued their walk in companionable silence, the waves providing gentle background music to their thoughts. Finally, Claire spoke again, her voice soft but clear over the ocean sounds. "There's something else you should know. About Lily's name." Alexander glanced at her, curious. "What about it?" "Her full name is Lily Alexandra Palmer," Claire said, not looking at him. "I told David it was for my grandmother, but—" She shrugged slightly. "Even then, I couldn't quite let go of what might have been." The revelation hit Alexander with unexpected force. All these years, through her marriage to another man, through building a separate life, Claire had carried a piece of him forward, had given their daughter a connection to him, however hidden. "Thank you," he said simply, unable to articulate the complex emotions the gesture evoked. They had reached the point where their beach walk usually turned back toward the cottage, but tonight, by unspoken agreement, they continued forward, toward the lights of Alexander's mansion in the distance. "I had my assistant clear out the east wing," Alexander mentioned casually. "It has its own entrance, separate kitchen, plenty of room for Lily's art studio. If you ever wanted a place to stay closer to the hospital during bad weather or late shifts. No pressure." Claire laughed softly. "One day at a time, Alexander. Remember?" "One day at a time," he agreed, allowing his hand to brush against hers as they walked, not quite holding but no longer completely separate. As autumn deepened into winter, the three of them established new rhythms. Lily thrived at her new school, making friends quickly and excelling in both academics and art. Claire settled into her role at New York Presbyterian, her surgical skills and research acumen quickly making her a valued leader in the department. And Alexander, true to his word, reconfigured his life to accommodate not just his professional responsibilities but his growing connections to Claire and Lily. He never moved into the cottage, maintaining his separate residence at the mansion, but the boundaries between their lives grew increasingly permeable. Family dinners became daily occurrences, weekend outings a regular fixture. By unspoken agreement, they maintained the fiction that Alexander was simply a family friend to Lily, though his role in her life expanded steadily to encompass many of the duties and joys of fatherhood. Winter gave way to spring, then summer once more. On a warm July morning almost exactly a year after their fateful first meeting on the garden path, Alexander sat beside Claire on the bleachers of the local tennis club, watching Lily compete in her first junior tournament. "She's good," Claire murmured as their daughter executed a perfect backhand down the line. "Really good." "She has natural talent," Alexander agreed proudly. "But more importantly, she loves it. Not because she has to win, but because she enjoys the game itself." Claire's hand found his on the bench between them, a gesture that had become more frequent in recent months. Unlike her biological father at the same age? Alexander chuckled ruefully. "I was a menace on the court at her age. Every match was life or death, every opponent an enemy to be vanquished. I had no concept of playing for the joy of it." "And now?" Claire asked, watching him closely. Alexander considered the question, looking out at Lily, her face intense with concentration but also alight with enjoyment. "Now I understand that winning means nothing if you've lost sight of why you're playing in the first place." Lily won her match, rushing to the bleachers afterward to be enveloped in congratulatory hugs from both adults. As they celebrated with ice cream at the club cafe, Lily suddenly asked, "Can we go to the beach house for the 4th of July weekend? All of us." The beach house in question was a modest property Alexander had purchased 3 months earlier, not a mansion like his Hamptons estate but a comfortable 4-bedroom home on a quiet stretch of Maine coastline. They had spent several weekends there already, discovering tide pools and flying kites on windy bluffs. "I don't see why not," Claire replied, looking to Alexander for confirmation. "Absolutely," he agreed. "We can leave Thursday evening after your mom's shift." "Yes." Lily pumped her fist triumphantly. "Can I have the blue bedroom again? The one with the window seat?" As she chattered excitedly about her plans for the weekend, Alexander found himself watching Claire instead of their daughter. The year had softened something in her, not her strength or independence, which remained formidable, but her wariness, her protective barriers. She caught his gaze and smiled, a private communication that needed no words. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Alexander and Claire sat on the cottage porch, a habit that had survived all the changes of the past year. "She asked me something interesting today," Claire said, breaking a comfortable silence. "While you were on your conference call." "Oh." Alexander set aside the industry report he'd been skimming. "She asked if you were going to be her dad someday." Alexander's heart rate quickened. "What did you tell her?" "I asked her how she would feel about that," Claire replied. "She said she thinks you already are, in all the ways that matter. That David will always be her first dad, but there's room in her heart for you too." "Wise beyond her years," Alexander murmured, profoundly moved. "She gets that from her mother," Claire said with a small smile. Then, more seriously, "I think it might be time to tell her the truth, Alexander. The full truth. She's old enough to understand and she already loves you. It won't change that, it will just give her context." Alexander nodded slowly. "If you think she's ready, I trust your judgment. But Claire." He hesitated, then pressed forward. "What about us? What are we to each other now?" Claire looked out at the darkening sky, her profile limned in the soft porch light. "We're co-parents," she said. "Friends? Maybe something more, evolving in its own time." "Is that enough for you?" Alexander asked quietly. "After everything?" Claire turned to him then, her amber eyes reflecting both past hurts and present possibilities. "A year ago I would have said no. That too much had happened, too much water under the bridge. But now..." She reached for his hand, her fingers threading through his. "Now I find myself grateful for every step of the journey, even the painful ones, because they led us here. To this porch, to Lily, to the people we've become." Alexander lifted their joined hands, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I don't deserve this second chance, or third chance technically." "It's not about deserving," Claire corrected him gently. "It's about choosing, every day, to be present for the people you love. And you've done that, Alexander. You've shown up, consistently, not just with money or grand gestures, but with time and attention and genuine care." "I love you," he said simply. "I never stopped, not really. Even when I thought I had." Claire's smile was tender, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I know. And against all odds and my better judgment. I love you too." When they told Lily the truth that weekend, her reaction surprised them both. After a few thoughtful questions and tears of relief, she simply said, "I think I always knew we were connected somehow. It felt right when you came into our lives." 6 months later, Alexander and Claire were married in a simple beach ceremony, with Lily proudly serving as both flower girl and ring bearer. The Hamptons mansion was sold, with proceeds going to a foundation for children with heart defects. They made the cottage their home, its modest warmth more suited to family life than Alexander's former showplace had ever been. Mercer Innovations continued to thrive under shared leadership, but Alexander's priorities had fundamentally shifted. On Lily's 10th birthday, watching her blow out candles on a cake decorated with tennis rackets and artists' palettes, he caught Claire's eye across the table and knew the journey had been worth every step. Some might say Alexander Mercer lost an empire and gained a family. But he understood a more profound truth. He had finally discovered what winning really meant. The greatest fortunes in life aren't measured in bank accounts or business acquisitions. They're counted in moments of genuine connection and the courage to be vulnerable with those we love. Sometimes it takes something as random as a tennis ball flying over a fence to show us what's been missing, to remind us that no achievement matters if there's no one to share it with, and that it's never too late to become the person we were always meant to be. In the end, Alexander's greatest legacy wasn't his technology or wealth. It was the love he had learned to give freely, the kind that doesn't diminish when shared but grows stronger, connecting us to something larger than ourselves and reminding us what truly matters in this brief, beautiful journey we call life.